The red dress hung in my closet like an unanswered question. Bright, hopeful, maybe a bit too bold for a woman my age, 62. I had bought it 3 weeks ago, picturing Benjamin's smile when he saw me wearing it. "You look stunning, Mom," he would say. Just like he used to when I dressed up for his school plays or graduation ceremonies, back when I mattered to him. Still, I slipped it on. The silk felt cool against my skin. The mirror reflected a woman who had grown skilled at masking loneliness with carefully applied lipstick and rehearsed smiles. Margaret Waters, still my name even though it had been 15 years since Benjamin's father and I divorced. Some parts of us stick around longer than marriages. My phone buzzed. A message from Benjamin. "Looking forward to lunch, Mom." The usual place. 1 p.m. My heart fluttered, embarrassingly so, just like always when he reached out. At 35, he was still my baby, even if he'd hate hearing that. Successful, handsome, with his father's stubborn jawline and my grandmother's green eyes. A real estate developer with a downtown penthouse and a social media feed that made his life look like a never-ending sunny day. I arrived at Romano's 15 minutes early, clutching my purse like armor. The hostess, a young woman with warm eyes, guided me to our regular table by the window. The restaurant buzzed with the joyful chaos of Mother's Day, flowers on every table, kids handing over handmade cards, laughter echoing through the room. "Your son will be joining you?" she asked, folding napkins with practiced ease. "Yes, any minute now," I lied without hesitation. I'd been telling versions of that lie for months. 1 o'clock came and went. Rosa, the waitress, a kind middle-aged woman, approached with patient sympathy. "Would you like to start with an appetizer while you wait?" "He's just running late," I said, steady despite the familiar knot tightening in my stomach. You know how traffic is. By 1:30, I could no longer ignore the pitying glances from other diners. A mother at the next table opened a jewelry box, her daughter and son-in-law beaming with joy. The woman's face glowed with the warm contentment of being truly cherished. My phone stayed silent. I ordered salmon, Benjamin's favorite, convincing myself he'd arrived just as the dish was served. The waitress brought bread I couldn't touch and water I couldn't drink through the lump in my throat. Around me, families celebrated with the effortless closeness I once took for granted. "Are you dining alone today?" Rosa asked gently, placing my plate in front of me. "My son is," I began, then stopped. The truth weighed heavily in my chest, a stone too heavy to lift. "Yes, I'm alone," I whispered. She nodded, not judging, just like a server learns to navigate the complicated landscape of human sorrow. "The salmon looks perfect. Chef's specialty." I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The warmth of the restaurant felt suffocating now, all that joy pressing against my fragile mask. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through social media, trying to drown out the soundtrack of Mother's Day happiness all around me. That's when I saw it. Benjamin's Instagram story, posted 20 minutes ago. A photo of him at Lou Bernardine, the upscale seafood restaurant across town. Smiling broadly, arm around a woman I recognized, Christine, his stepmother, his father's second wife, who had swept in 2 years after our divorce with her flawless looks, her perfect cooking, and her uncanny ability to make Richard feel young again. The caption read, "Mother's Day lunch with my real mother. Grateful for the woman who showed me what family means. Blessed real mom. Grateful." The phone slipped from my trembling hands, crashing onto the table. Several diners glanced over, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern as they registered my face. Real mother. Those words hit me like a slap. I thought of the 35 years I'd spent raising him. The sleepless nights when he had colic. The soccer games I cheered at until my voice was gone. The college tuition I paid by working 3 jobs. I thought of the divorce. How I shielded him from his father's worst cruelty. How I swallowed my own pain to make sure he still felt loved. Real mother. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Rosa was at my side again, her hand gentle on my shoulder. I looked up at this stranger who'd shown me more kindness in the past hour than my own son had in months. "I'm fine," I whispered, though we both knew it was a lie. She glanced at my phone, still displaying Benjamin's post. Her expression tightened with understanding. "Some people," she said softly, "don't deserve the love they're given." I paid the bill with shaky hands, leaving Rosa a generous tip for her kindness. The walk to my car felt endless. Every step weighed down by the crushing realization that I'd been living in a dream. Benjamin hadn't forgotten about lunch. He had simply decided not to show up. He had chosen her. Real mother. At home, I sat in my kitchen, still wearing the red dress, staring at the Mother's Day card I'd kept from last year, the last one he'd sent me. It bore a generic message about love and gratitude, signed hurriedly with just Ben. No personal note. No private joke. No recognition of the years we shared. How long had I been sleepwalking through this relationship? How many signs had I turned away from? How many tiny wounds had I convinced myself didn't matter? My phone buzzed. A text from Benjamin. "Sorry, Mom. Got stuck at work. Rain check." The sheer nerve of it stole my breath. He thought I was oblivious. He thought I was still the same woman who swallowed every excuse, smiled, nodded, and pretended everything was all right. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. Hurt. Angry. Desperate. None felt right. None felt like enough. Finally, I wrote. "I saw your post." The message was read instantly, but no reply came. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. I sat there as the sun set, still clad in red, feeling something cold and hard forming in my chest. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was something sharper, clearer, almost like relief. The old Margaret would have called. Would have demanded an explanation. Would have cried, begged, and eventually forgiven. The old Margaret would have found a way to blame herself. But the woman sitting in that kitchen, watching the day fade outside the window, felt different. Changed. That red dress was no longer just fabric, it had become a banner, a declaration of war, even if I didn't realize it yet. I opened my laptop and typed in the search bar. Flights to Madrid. The screen filled with possibilities, dates, times, prices, all representing something I had never let myself imagine before: freedom. Escape. The chance to be someone who mattered again, even if it was only to myself. My finger hovered over the Book Now button. From somewhere nearby, I heard my neighbor's Mother's Day barbecue, the laughter and clinking glasses of a family that actually wanted to be together. Real mother. I clicked book. Minutes later, the confirmation email arrived, along with a strange calm I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I would pack. The day after, I would disappear. And Benjamin Scott, my son, my heart, my greatest disappointment, would finally understand what it meant to lose something he never valued. But tonight, I would sit here in my red dress and plan the first day of the rest of my life. A life where I was nobody's consolation prize, nobody's second choice, nobody's forgotten responsibility. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Benjamin. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long moment, then powered off the phone. Tomorrow there would be time for talking. For explanations. For apologies. For the messy emotions tangled in broken families. But tonight belonged to me. Tonight, I would dream of Spanish sunsets and morning coffees in plazas where nobody knew my name, my story, or my failures as a mother. Tonight, I would imagine what it felt like to be someone's real everything again, even if that someone was just me. The morning after Mother's Day, I woke before dawn with a clarity born of absolute certainty. No tears. No doubts. No desperate hope for a miracle call from Benjamin. The woman who sat alone in Romano's restaurant eating salmon while her son celebrated with another family was gone. What remained was someone tougher. Sharper. Someone who understood that love was a choice, never an obligation. I had 48 hours before my flight to Madrid. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Benjamin, 12 from his father Richard, and 3 from Christine. The last number almost made me laugh. His stepmother, calling to smooth things over with her rehearsed therapist voice. Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I deleted the voicemails without listening. Packing was methodical, surgical. I took only what mattered. My grandmother's pearl necklace. The photo of my mother holding me as a baby. My journals from the last 2 decades. Everything else, the furniture Benjamin promised to help move, the china set I saved for his future wife, the baby clothes from his infancy, stayed behind like evidence of a crime. I called my neighbor, Donna Pelosi, a no-nonsense woman in her 70s who'd watched my marriage fall apart with the steady wisdom of someone who survived her own heartbreaks. I'm leaving for a while, I told her, sitting in her kitchen filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls. Could you watch the house? Donna studied me with her sharp brown eyes. How long's a while? I don't know. She nodded slowly. Good for you. That boy needs some hard lessons. I handed her the spare key, my lawyer's contact info, and instructions to forward any important mail to my bank. Everything else could wait, or rot. I didn't care anymore. The flight to Madrid felt like stepping through a portal. I'd chosen Spain on impulse, remembering a college course on Spanish literature where I dreamed of wandering the Prado Museum, sitting in cafes where Hemingway once wrote, dreams I'd set aside for marriage, motherhood, and 1,000 small sacrifices that somehow erased me. Benjamin's calls trailed me across the Atlantic. His name flashed on my phone screen mid-flight, but instead of anxiety, I felt a curious calm. The flight attendant, Janet, a woman with gentle eyes and flawless English, offered me wine and asked if I was traveling alone. Yes, I replied, and the word felt like a small victory. I rented a modest apartment in Madrid's Malesana district, a bohemian quarter of twisting alleys and secret courtyards. The landlord, Federico Webb, spoke a lively mix of broken English and Spanish, clearly pleased to have an American tenant who paid 3 months up front and asked no questions. You writer? He asked, eyeing my single suitcase. Artist? I'm figuring that out, I said, and he nodded as if that explained everything. The apartment was tiny but perfect, a studio with tall windows overlooking a courtyard where an elderly woman hung laundry each morning, singing opera, off-key but passionately. Inside, a small kitchen, a narrow bed, and a desk where I could sit and watch life pass by. For the first week, I did nothing but simply be. I shopped at the market, practiced ordering coffee in Spanish, wandered the city until my feet ached. I switched off international roaming and only used the apartment Wi-Fi to check my bank balance and read Spanish news via Google Translate. Benjamin's missed calls piled up like unpaid bills, 17 grew to 30, then 50, then 73. Richard joined the chorus, then Christine, followed by faces I barely recognized, mutual friends dragged into the drama, distant relatives handed a polished version of the story. I imagined their conversations. We're worried about Margaret. She's not answering. She just vanished. Good. Let them worry. Let them wonder. Let them finally feel what it's like to need someone who simply isn't there. In the second week, I began to write, not about Benjamin or the divorce or the years of quiet compromises that had led me to that lonely restaurant table. I wrote about Madrid, how the afternoon light spilled across Plaza Mayor, the bittersweet taste of churros dipped in thick chocolate, the echo of laughter bouncing off ancient stone walls. I wrote about the woman I'd been at 22, before I learned to shrink myself to fit into other people's expectations. I wrote about dreams long buried, desires so deeply hidden I had convinced myself they never existed. My phone buzzed occasionally with international alerts, but I learned to ignore them. Whatever crisis Benjamin faced, whatever guilt Richard wrestled with, whatever delicate mediation Christine attempted, none of it was my problem anymore. 3 weeks into my Spanish escape, I found the café. Nestled on a quiet street near Retiro Park, it was run by Rosa Pratt Kelly, an Irish woman who had moved to Madrid 30 years ago and never looked back. The cafe served flawless café con leche and shelves lined with books in a dozen languages. American? Rosa asked on my third visit, her Irish brogue softened by decades of Spanish sun. Temporarily, I answered, though I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We're all temporary, love. Some of us just admit it. Rosa became my first true friend in Madrid. At 68, twice divorced, mother of 3 who called every Sunday and saw her children every Christmas, she had built a life on her own terms. You could see it in her confident stride, hear it in her unapologetic laughter. "You're running from something," she said one afternoon, topping up my coffee without waiting to be asked. "I'm running to something," I corrected. "Same difference," she smiled. "Different direction." I told her about Benjamin, the restaurant, the social media post that shattered something I hadn't even realized was broken. Rosa listened without judgment, nodding softly, offering gentle sounds of understanding. "My middle son did the same," she said after I finished. "Chose his father's new family over mine after the divorce. Broke my heart in two." "What did you do?" "I let him go. Hardest thing I ever did. But sometimes love means stepping back enough for someone to see what they've lost." "Did he come back?" Rosa's smile was complicated. "He tried. But by then, I'd learned to be happy without him. Changed everything that did." That night, I sat in my small apartment, pouring my thoughts into my journal. The words flowed like a river finally unblocked, months of suppressed feelings finding their voice. I wrote about the years I'd made excuses for Benjamin's distance. The way I explained his growing coldness as maturity, his absence as success. I wrote about the moment I realized I had become a stranger to my own son, and how terrifying it was to accept that he preferred it that way. My phone buzzed silently on the desk with another missed call. I glanced at it, saw Benjamin's name, and a text. "Mom, please call me. I need to talk. It's important." I stared at the message. The old Margaret would have called immediately, worried something terrible had happened, dropped everything to fix the crisis behind the sudden urgency. But the woman in this Madrid apartment, surrounded by Spanish books and the scent of café con leche, felt no such compulsion. If it was truly important, he would have thought of that on Mother's Day. If it was truly urgent, he would have reconsidered before posting pictures of his real mother on social media. I deleted the message without replying and turned off the phone. Outside my window, the opera-singing woman began her evening aria, "Tonight, something from Carmen." The notes drifted through the courtyard like the soundtrack to my rebirth. I powered on my laptop and began composing an email to Donna Pelosi, my neighbor back home. "I'm extending my stay indefinitely," I typed. "Please keep an eye on the house. I'll update you on any arrangements." I hit send and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I planned to visit the Prado Museum. I would sit at the cafe with Rosa and practice my Spanish. I'd write in my journal about the woman I was becoming, the one who no longer needed anyone's approval just to exist. Benjamin could wait. He'd had 35 years of my immediate attention, my unconditional availability, my endless well of forgiveness. Now it was his turn to experience what it felt like to be the one reaching out, the one left wondering, the one whose love was not met with the same intensity it was given. The opera singer hit a soaring high note, and I found myself smiling. Down in the courtyard, other residents began clapping. I opened my window and joined their applause. It was the first sound I'd made in Madrid. The first time I declared my presence instead of fading into the background. It felt like waking up. 6 months into my Spanish exile, I had become a woman I barely recognized, and I adored her fiercely. My Spanish had improved enough that I could argue with market vendors and laugh at Rosa's jokes without needing translation. I'd lost 15 pounds hiking Madrid's hills. My hair had grown past my shoulders for the first time since Benjamin was born, and I'd started wearing colors that made me feel alive instead of invisible. The apartment had transformed too. I'd filled it with thriving plants soaking in the afternoon sun, hung local artwork on the walls, and stocked the bookshelves with Spanish novels and poetry collections. It no longer felt temporary. It felt like home. Benjamin's calls dwindled from daily to weekly, then to sporadic bursts of desperation. I learned the pattern. 2 weeks of silence, then a flood of calls, texts, and voicemails filled with increasingly dramatic pleas. "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. Please call me back. I need to explain. Dad says you're having a breakdown. Let us help you." Breakdown. The word made me laugh until my sides ached. If disappearing from a life that had slowly suffocated me was a breakdown, then I was happily shattered. I began teaching English conversation classes at a local community center. My students were a mix of teenagers preparing for university and adults striving to advance their careers. They called me Professor Margaret and brought small gifts, flowers from their gardens, homemade cookies, books of Spanish poetry with handwritten notes in the margins. Elena, a shy 17-year-old who reminded me of myself at that age, became my favorite. She stayed after class to practice pronunciation, and we developed a friendship that crossed age and culture effortlessly. "You're different from other Americans," she told me one afternoon as we walked through Retiro Park. "More, how do you say, authentic?" "I'm learning to be myself," I replied, and she nodded as if that explained everything perfectly. It was Elena who was with me when everything changed. We sat at an outdoor cafe near the Prado, sharing churros and practicing English idioms, when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Spanish number. I almost ignored it. I'd learned to screen calls religiously, but something made me answer. "DGA Margaret?" The voice was familiar but strained. It was Benjamin's stepmother. "I'm in Madrid. I need to see you." The cho turned to ash in my mouth. "How did you get this number?" "I hired a private investigator. Please don't hang up. I flew here because Benjamin, he's not well, Margaret. He needs you." I looked at Elena, who watched my face with concern. "Where are you?" "At the Western Palace. Please, just give me an hour." "1 hour, and then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want." I should have hung up. Every instinct I'd developed over the past 6 months screamed at me to protect the peace I'd built. But curiosity, or maybe a last ghost of maternal worry, made me agree. The cafe at the Western Palace. 1 hour. Elena walked with me to the hotel, nervously chatting in Spanish about how beautiful the building was, how expensive the rooms must be. I barely heard her. My mind raced through scenarios, bracing for manipulation, guilt, or whatever carefully crafted emotional trap Christine had prepared. Christine looked older than I remembered. Her perfect blonde hair showed dark roots, and her usually impeccable makeup was hastily applied. She sat at a corner table, wearing a wrinkled designer dress, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. Margaret stood when she saw me, her hands trembling noticeably. "Thank you for coming. You look wonderful." I sat down opposite her, without a hug, without warmth, without any of the usual social graces I once offered without thinking. "You have 55 minutes. She flinched at my tone. "I deserve that. I deserve much worse." "Yes, you do." Christine stared into her coffee cup. He's been struggling since you left." "Really struggling?" "He lost the Peterson contract, you know, the big residential development. He couldn't focus, couldn't make decisions. He's been drinking too much, sleeping too little. Richard and I are worried about him." "Are you?" My voice was flat, detached. "Margaret, I know you hate me. I know you think I stole your family, but I never wanted to come between you and Benjamin. That Instagram post, I told him not to write it. I told him it was cruel. But you didn't stop him." "No, I didn't stop him." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was flattered. I was selfish. I wanted to feel like I mattered to him." Then Christine looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. "Now I see what I've done. Not just to you, but to him. He's carrying so much guilt, so much shame. He keeps saying he's killed the one person who ever loved him unconditionally. She's right. The bluntness of my reply seemed to catch her off guard. She probably expected tears, anger, or some maternal softness at the mention of Benjamin's pain. Margaret, I know I have no right to ask this, but please call him, see him. He's falling apart. I sipped my café con leche, watching tourists stream past the hotel windows. Do you know what I did for 35 years, Christine? I made excuses for Benjamin's cruelty. I rationalized his selfishness. I convinced myself his coldness was maturity, his neglect independence. I twisted myself into knots trying to earn love from someone who only saw me as an obligation. He doesn't see you that way now. No. Now he sees me as someone to fix his problems. Someone who can make him feel better about himself. Someone to soothe his guilt so he can go back to ignoring me with a clear conscience. Christine's face crumpled. That's not what this is about, is it? I leaned forward. Tell me, Christine, in all these months that Benjamin's been struggling, has he once, just once, acknowledged what he did to me? Has he apologized for the cruelty of that Mother's Day? Taken responsibility for humiliating me in public? She was silent for a long moment. He says he was confused. He says he didn't mean to hurt you. He says. I stood, placing money on the table for my coffee. But what has he done? What has he changed? What has he sacrificed to make amends? Margaret, please. I spent decades teaching Benjamin his actions had no consequences, that no matter how he treated me, I'd always be there, always forgive, always make it easy for him. I taught him my love was worthless because it was unconditional. I gathered my purse, feeling an unexpected calm. You flew across an ocean to ask me to rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me nothing has changed. He's still the same man who left me alone in a restaurant on Mother's Day. The same man who called another woman his real mother on social media. The only difference is now his cruelty causes him discomfort, and he wants me to fix it. He's your son. Yes. And I'm his mother. A real mother teaches her children that cruelty has consequences. A real mother doesn't enable selfishness by always cleaning up the mess. I walked toward the hotel lobby, then paused and turned back. Christine, I want you to deliver a message to Benjamin from me. Tell him I love him enough to let him face the consequences of his choices. Tell him I love him enough not to make this easy for him. And tell him if he wants forgiveness, he'll have to earn it. Not through calls, guilt trips, or intermediaries, but through real change. Margaret, wait. Tell him when he's ready to take full responsibility for his actions, when he's ready to do the work to become a better man, he knows where to find me. Until then, I'm done being his emergency contact. I stepped out into the warm Madrid afternoon, leaving Christine at her corner table with cold coffee and a failed mission. Across the street, Elena waited, absorbed in her phone with the intense focus only teenagers have. ¿Vienes? She asked as I approached. Just what I expected, I said in Spanish, surprised by how steady my voice was, and exactly what I needed. We walked back through the city center, past flower vendors and old men playing chess in the plaza. I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there. That evening, I called Rosa and told her about the meeting. She listened without interruption, making soft sounds of understanding. You did right, she said when I finished. Love isn't about making life easy for others. Sometimes, it means making things difficult. I thought I should feel worse about it, I confessed. Like guilt or sadness or something. But you don't. No. I feel free. Rosa laughed, the gentle wind chime sound I'd come to cherish. That's because you're finally stepping into what it means to be a real mother. Not the kind who enables and excuses, but the kind who teaches and holds accountable. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and poured into my journal. The words came like a flowing stream, months of clarity crystallizing into honest, clean sentences. I wrote about the woman I'd been, the one who confused love with convenience, who mistook enabling for care. I wrote about the woman I was becoming, the one who understood that true love sometimes demands distance, that genuine compassion can look like harshness. And I wrote about Benjamin, my son, my heart, my greatest teacher, the boy who showed me how unconditional love could become a cage, and endless forgiveness, a weapon. Tomorrow, I would visit the prow and stand before the Goyas, those paintings of beautiful, terrible truths. I would have coffee with Rosa and practice Spanish with Elena. I would keep building the life I'd found in my absence. But tonight, I would sit in my Madrid apartment and feel proud of the mother I'd finally become, the hard one, the honest one, the one who loved her son enough to let him fall. 1 year and 3 months after I disappeared from Benjamin's life, he found me. I was at Rosa's cafe, grading conversation exercises from my advanced English class, when I saw him through the window. He stood across the narrow street like a ghost made flesh, thinner than I remembered, his expensive suit rumpled and ill-fitting. His face wore the specific exhaustion that comes from months of poor choices and sleepless nights. For a moment, the old maternal instinct stirred, a pull to rush outside, hold him, fix whatever brought him here, so broken. But that woman was gone, buried somewhere beneath Madrid's cobblestones and my newfound self-respect. I kept grading. Benjamin crossed the street with tentative steps, like a man nearing a precipice. Through the cafe's glass door, I watched him gather courage, his hand hovering over the handle. Rosa, who'd been observing from behind the counter, came over to my table. "That him?" she asked with her Irish-Spanish accent. "That's him. Looks like hell." "Good," Rosa nodded approvingly, returning to her post. But I saw her position herself nearby, my fierce protector. A woman who'd become more family to me in 1 year than my son had been in decades. Benjamin finally entered. The bell above the door chimed his arrival like a funeral toll. The few other customers glanced up with mild curiosity, then returned to their conversations. To them, he was just another tourist, another American disturbing their quiet afternoon. "Mom," I looked up from Elena's essay about her dreams of studying in England. Benjamin stood there for a long moment, clearly unprepared for my indifference. I saw him taking stock of the changes, my longer hair, my sun-kissed skin, the confidence in my posture replacing years of apology. "You look," he started, then stopped. "Different." "I am different." He shifted uneasily, eyes darting around the cafe as if searching for directions. "Can I sit?" I nodded toward the chair opposite me without enthusiasm. He sat heavily, the weight of whatever drove him across an ocean visible in every movement. "I've been trying to reach you for months," he said. "I know. Why didn't you answer?" I set down my red pen and met his gaze. "Because I didn't want to talk to you." The bluntness hit him like a blow. He flinched, fidgeting with his phone. "Mom, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, Benjamin." "Then what are you?" "Free." The word hung between us like a sharp edge. I watched him absorb it, saw the moment he realized my absence wasn't a plea for attention or manipulation. It was exactly what it seemed, a choice to leave his life behind. "Christine came to see you," he said at last. "She did. She said you wouldn't listen, that I was cold." Christine experienced me setting boundaries. Maybe that felt cold to someone used to my previous lack of them. Benjamin leaned forward, adopting the persuasive tone he'd used as a child when wanting something. "Mom, I know I hurt you. The Mother's Day thing was wrong." I was confused. I was angry about the divorce. I stopped him with a single word that cut through his rehearsed apology. "Stop." He blinked, thrown off his script. "Benjamin, listen carefully. You didn't hurt me on Mother's Day. You revealed who you really are. The pain comes from 35 years of my own blindness, my desperate hope that if I loved you enough, you'd love me back the same way. I do love you." "No, you don't. You love the idea of me being available when you need me. You love the comfort of knowing I'll always forgive, excuse, and clean up your messes. But you don't love me, Margaret Waters, as a person worthy of respect and consideration. His face went pale. That's not true. When was the last time you asked about my life without expecting something? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding you? When was the last time you considered how your actions would affect me before taking them? Silence stretched between us. Outside, vendors shouted their wares, children laughed in the plaza, ordinary sounds of a world turning, oblivious to the reckoning at this small cafe table. I'm here now, he said finally, voice small. Yes, you are. And why is that, Benjamin? What disaster brought you to Spain? His jaw tightened. Things have been hard since you left. I lost some contracts, big ones. I couldn't focus. I couldn't make decisions. My business is falling apart, and what? What else? What else has fallen apart since I left? I asked quietly. He looked away, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Dad and Christine are having trouble. She blames herself for what happened. Keeps saying she drove you away. Their marriage is under strain. Anything more? The house. Your house. I was supposed to help sell it, remember? But you vanished. I didn't know what to do with it. The taxes, the upkeep, it's been expensive. I almost smiled. Of course. My abandoned home had become his financial burden, a constant reminder of my absence draining his resources. Is that all? My friends keep asking about you. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth, I said coldly. Tell them you treated your mother so poorly that she chose to disappear rather than endure any more abuse. I didn't abuse you. You emotionally discarded me the moment it was convenient. You humiliated me in public. You replaced me with someone else and expected gratitude for the scraps of attention you gave. What would you call that? Benjamin's composure finally broke. I called you back. I texted after Mother's Day. I tried to explain. You sent me a text saying you got held up at work while posting pictures of your stepmother online. I panicked. I didn't know how to tell you about Christine's surprise lunch. So instead of canceling, you lied to me. You chose her comfort over my dignity. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I leaned back, studying him. Benjamin, what do you want from me? Really? What are you hoping to achieve by coming here? He was silent for a long moment, eyes fixed on his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I want you to come home. I want things to go back to how they were. How they were? I echoed. When I was always available whenever you needed me, forgiving whatever you did, asking nothing but the occasional text or obligatory holiday visit. We were never family, Benjamin. We were an addiction. I was addicted to giving you unconditional love, and you were addicted to taking it without giving back. He looked up sharply. That's cruel. It's the truth. Truths are often cruel. Rosa appeared with a fresh café con leche for me and shot Benjamin a pointed look. Gracias, Rosa, I said. She squeezed my shoulder briefly, a quiet act of support Benjamin didn't miss. You have a life here, he said, almost accusing. I do. Friends, students, a routine. So you don't need me. I met his eyes steadily. No, Benjamin. I don't need you. The words hit him like a punch. He slumped back, his face cycling through disbelief, pain, and maybe fear. I need you, he whispered. I know. But need isn't love. And I'm done being needed by someone who doesn't value what I give. So what now? You're just going to stay here forever? Pretend you don't have a son? I don't pretend anything. I have a son who chose to treat me like I was disposable. I've chosen to accept that and build a life that doesn't depend on his approval. Benjamin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. My lawyer's been calling. There are papers to sign for the house sale. Financial stuff. There it was, the real reason for his trip. Not love, not regret, not a desire to heal. Business. Money. The inconvenience of my absence. Email them to me, I said. I don't have your email. Then you'll have to figure it out. I gathered my papers and pen. Benjamin, I want you to understand this isn't punishment or revenge. It's me protecting myself from further harm. You're welcome in my life when you show that you value me for more than an emergency contact. How do I do that? I don't know. But it starts with owning who you've chosen to be. Not just apologizing for what you did. I left him sitting there, just as he'd left me sitting alone in Romano's over a year ago. But unlike then, I felt no sadness, no doubts, no hope for sudden understanding. I felt proud. Outside, Madrid's afternoon sun warmed my face as I walked home. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena, class exterminata. I want to practice the subjunctive. I typed back, see you then. Behind me, through the cafe window, I caught one last glimpse of Benjamin, still seated, staring at his phone with the lost look of a man who just realized some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I didn't look back again. 3 days after Benjamin appeared in Madrid, my phone lit up with 23 missed calls. I found them while sipping my morning coffee in the courtyard, the sound of Senora Martinez's operatic warm-ups drifting down from the apartment above. My phone had been quietly charging in the bedroom as I slept the peaceful sleep of someone whose conscience was clear. 23 missed calls. 6 from Benjamin, 4 from Richard, 3 from Christine, 2 from unknown numbers, and 8 from a contact saved simply as B attorney. I deleted every one without checking a single voicemail. Elena arrived promptly at 4 for her extra English lesson, carrying her grammar book and a small paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon. Magdalenas, she said, using the Spanish word for those little sponge cakes. My grandmother made them. She says food helps with tough talks. What makes you think I've had a tough talk? Elena gave me that look teenagers reserve for adults who underestimate their insight. You've been different since Tuesday. Stronger, but also, how do you say, more solid? More solid, I repeated, liking the sound of it. The man who came to the cafe was your son. Ah. She nodded knowingly. The one who hurt you. Yes. Did he apologize? He tried. But apologies without change are just noise. We spent the next hour working through the subjunctive mood, the grammar of uncertainty, wishes that may never come true, and conditions that exist only in possibility. It felt appropriate. If I were to move to London, Elena practiced, I would miss Madrid terribly. If my son were to truly change, I found myself saying, I might consider forgiveness. Elena looked up from her notebook. But you don't think he will change? No, I don't. Then you are free. Simple words from a 17-year-old, carrying more wisdom than all of Benjamin's frantic calls combined. That evening, Rosa closed the cafe early and insisted on taking me to dinner at her favorite tapas bar. We settled at a small table overlooking Plaza de Santa Ana, sharing patatas bravas and watching the world drift by. You look different, she said, echoing Elena's observation. Settled. I feel like I've finally arrived somewhere I was always meant to be. And where is that, in your own life? Rosa raised her glass of Rioja in a toast to arrival. We clinked glasses just as my phone buzzed again, another call from B attorney. I glanced at it, then flipped the phone face down on the table. They're persistent, Rosa said. They're desperate. Benjamin's business is collapsing, and apparently, they need my signature on some papers about my old house. Will you sign them? I thought about it. Eventually, yes, but not because he demanded it, because I choose to. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A knock at my door exactly at 8 a.m. I opened it to find a young man in a tailored suit, clutching a briefcase, looking awkward and out of place. Senora Waters, my name is David Glickman. I'm an attorney representing your son, Benjamin Scott. I sized him up through the partially open door. How did you get my address? We hired an investigator. Ma'am, I need to discuss urgent legal matters with you. No, you don't. I started to close the door, but he stepped forward. Please, ma'am. Your son's business is in serious trouble. There are tax issues concerning your property in the U.S. If you don't sign these documents, both of you could face severe legal consequences. Mr. Glickman, listen carefully. My son chose to end our relationship publicly and cruelly. He has made no real effort to fix the damage he caused. I am under no obligation to rescue him or sign his papers just because he's facing the fallout of his mistakes. But ma'am, if you or anyone else tries to contact me at my home again, I will report you to the Spanish authorities for harassment. Do I make myself clear? The lawyer's face flushed red. Mrs. Waters, your son is facing bankruptcy. Doesn't that concern you? A cold sharpness settled in my chest. Mr. Glickman, my son publicly declared I wasn't his real mother. He abandoned me on Mother's Day to celebrate with another woman. He treated me like I was disposable for years before that final insult. And now you expect me to save him from bankruptcy? He's your son. Yes. And I'm his mother. A real mother teaches her children that actions have consequences. A real mother doesn't enable destructive behavior by always cleaning up the mess. I closed the door firmly and locked it. Through the wood, I heard him calling my name, his voice growing more desperate. Eventually, the hallway fell silent. Made myself a coffee and called Rosa. They sent a lawyer to my apartment, I told her. Those bastards. Want me to call my cousin Miguel? He's with the Guardia Civil. Not yet. But thanks for the offer. What will you do now? I looked around my Madrid apartment, at the plants thriving in the afternoon light, the books I'd gathered, the photos Elena had taken of us feeding pigeons in Retiro Park. At the life I'd rebuilt from the ruins of my old one. I'm going to live my life. And if Benjamin wants to be part of it, he knows what he needs to do. The calls went on for another 2 weeks. Benjamin, Richard, Christine, various lawyers, and business contacts. My phone became a constant chorus of desperation that I silenced simply by pressing decline. Then, just as abruptly as it began, it stopped. A month later, I got an email from Donna Pelosi, my neighbor back home. Margaret, it read. Just so you know, your old house sold yesterday. Benjamin had to accept a much lower offer than expected because it was a rushed sale. Also heard his business declared bankruptcy last week. Richard and Christine are divorcing, apparently, the stress was too much for their marriage. Hope you're well. The neighborhood misses you. Donna. I read the email twice, waiting for some emotion to rise. Guilt, maybe? Sadness, regret? But all I felt was a quiet satisfaction, like a puzzle piece clicking perfectly into place. That afternoon, Elena and I were strolling through Retiro Park when she asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you think you'll ever speak to your son again? I considered it carefully. If he ever becomes someone capable of true accountability, real change, and genuine respect for others, then yes. But I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. And if he doesn't? Then I'll keep being grateful that I learned to love myself enough to walk away from people who don't value me. We stopped beside the Crystal Palace, its glass walls glowing in the late afternoon sun. Inside, tourists wandered through an art exhibit about memory and loss. My grandmother always said, Elena told me, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. Your grandmother sounds wise. She raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. She says life taught her that love without boundaries isn't love, it's fear. Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's fear. The words echoed in my mind as we resumed walking. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who confused enabling with nurturing, who mistook fear of abandonment for unconditional love. She felt like a stranger from a life long ago. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened my journal to a blank page. I wrote about the mother I had been, and the mother I was choosing to become. I wrote about boundaries and consequences, about love that empowers rather than enables. And I wrote about Benjamin, not with bitterness or anger, but with the clear-eyed understanding of someone who has finally learned to face the truth without flinching. He was 36 years old enough to know actions have consequences, that love is not a right but a privilege that must be earned and maintained through respect and care. Old enough to understand that some bridges, once burned, need to be rebuilt entirely, not just patched. Whether he would do that work was yet to be seen. But it was no longer my responsibility to make it easy for him. My phone buzzed with a message from Rosa. Flamenco show at the Tableau tomorrow night. You free? I typed back, see, life is for living. Outside my window, Senora Martinez began her evening performance. Tonight, something from La Traviata, her notes soaring through the courtyard like a celebration. Other residents opened their windows to listen, their applause mingling with the music. I opened my window, leaning into the warm Madrid night. Below, I saw Elena walking home from her evening English class at the community center, her head bent over her phone, probably texting her boyfriend about dreams of studying in London. Tomorrow, I would teach my conversation classes. I would have coffee with Rosa and plan our weekend trip to Segovia. I would water my plants, read Spanish poetry, and write in my journal about the woman I was becoming. I would live the life I'd chosen. A life where I was valued, respected, and cherished. A life where I was nobody's backup plan, nobody's emergency contact, nobody's convenient fix for problems they created themselves. A life where I was finally, truly somebody's real mother, my own. The opera singer hit her final soaring note, and the courtyard erupted in applause. I added my voice to the chorus, clapping for the beauty, the passion, the audacity of making music in the dark. It was the sound of a woman who had finally learned to celebrate herself.